My name is Samantha Phillips. I'm 30 years old, and after receiving a $980,000 disability settlement for severe spinal injuries that left me wheelchair-bound and requiring multiple surgeries, I discovered my own parents and 23 extended family members had stolen $150,000 of my medical money to take a luxury Mediterranean cruise while I was rationing pain medication and eating ramen noodles because I couldn't afford both food and physical therapy. What they didn't know was that their heartless theft from a disabled family member was about to trigger the most comprehensive legal destruction they could imagine, one that would cost them everything they thought they could steal from someone they saw as helpless and dependent. The workplace accident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in March while I was working as a physical therapist at Regional Medical Center. I was helping transfer a patient when the mechanical lift malfunctioned, sending 200 pounds of equipment crashing down on my spine and crushing 3 vertebrae in a way that would require years of surgery, rehabilitation, and adaptive equipment to manage. The impact was so severe that doctors initially weren't sure if I would ever walk again. Ms. Phillips, you've sustained significant compression fractures to your L2, L3, and L4 vertebrae, Dr. Martinez explained during my first consultation after the accident. You're going to need multiple spinal fusion surgeries, extensive physical therapy, and long-term pain management. The good news is that with proper treatment and rehabilitation, you should regain significant function, though you may always have mobility limitations. The irony of a physical therapist becoming disabled and needing the same services I had provided to others wasn't lost on me, but I was determined to approach my recovery with the same dedication and strategic planning I had used to help my patients achieve their rehabilitation goals. I knew the road ahead would be long and expensive, but I was prepared to do whatever was necessary to regain as much independence as possible. The legal case against Regional Medical Center and the equipment manufacturer took 18 months to resolve, but my attorney secured a $980,000 settlement that was specifically designated for my ongoing medical care, adaptive equipment, home modifications, and long-term rehabilitation needs. The settlement agreement included detailed language about how the funds should be used to ensure my medical needs were met throughout my recovery process. This settlement is designed to provide for your lifetime medical expenses related to your spinal injury, Attorney Sarah Chen explained during the settlement meeting. The funds should be carefully managed to ensure you have access to the treatments, equipment, and support services you'll need for years to come. The settlement felt like a lifeline that would allow me to access the best possible medical care while maintaining some financial independence, despite my disability. I had already researched the specialized treatments, adaptive equipment, and home modifications I would need, and the settlement would provide the resources to pursue every option for maximizing my recovery and quality of life. But within days of the settlement becoming public knowledge, my phone started ringing constantly with calls from family members I hadn't heard from in months, all suddenly interested in my well-being and eager to offer advice about managing such a substantial amount of money. "Samantha, honey, we're so relieved that you got such a good settlement," my mother Helen called the day after the news became official. "Your father and I have been talking about how this money could benefit the whole family, not just you. We've all been under so much stress since your accident. The suggestion that my disability settlement should benefit the whole family, rather than being used exclusively for my medical needs, was both shocking and deeply hurtful. The money was specifically intended to compensate for my lifetime of medical expenses and lost earning capacity, not to provide financial windfalls for relatives who hadn't been injured. Mom, this settlement is for my medical care and rehabilitation," I replied, hoping to clarify the purpose of the funds and discourage further discussion about family financial benefits. "I'm going to need multiple surgeries, specialized equipment, and years of therapy. This money needs to last for my entire lifetime of medical expenses." "But Samantha, you can't just hoard all that money when your family is struggling financially," my father Gary interjected when he got on the phone. "We've all been affected by your accident, and we deserve some compensation for the emotional stress and financial hardship we've endured supporting you through this crisis. Have you ever been told that your disability settlement should compensate your family members for the inconvenience of your accident? That's exactly what I was experiencing, as my parents treated my life-changing injuries as something that had primarily affected them, rather than recognizing that I was the one dealing with permanent disability and ongoing medical needs. The family pressure campaign intensified over the following weeks, with relatives calling to share their own financial struggles, and suggesting ways my settlement could help solve their problems, while supposedly benefiting my recovery process. "Samantha, your cousin Jennifer is having trouble with her mortgage payments," my Aunt Patricia explained during one of many unsolicited phone calls. If you could help her out with $20,000, it would relieve so much family stress, and you know how important it is to have family support during your recovery. The logic that my financial assistance to relatives would somehow benefit my own medical recovery was twisted but persistent, with family members consistently presenting their financial needs as being connected to my well-being and rehabilitation success. Meanwhile, my Uncle Robert had different ideas about how my settlement should be used for family benefit. "Samantha, our family has been through so much trauma because of your accident," he said during a visit to my apartment. "I think we should all take a family vacation together to reconnect and heal from this difficult experience. It would be therapeutic for everyone, especially you." Salba. The suggestion that I should fund a family vacation as therapy for my own disability was so absurd that I initially thought he was joking. But Robert was completely serious, and he had apparently been discussing this idea with other family members who were equally enthusiastic about using my medical money for recreational purposes. "A cruise would be perfect because it's accessible for your wheelchair, and being around family would be great for your emotional recovery," Robert continued, apparently having given considerable thought to this proposal. "We could book a group cruise with accessible cabins and make sure everyone could participate in your healing process." The family vacation proposals continued for weeks, with relatives offering increasingly elaborate justifications for why my disability settlement should fund their recreational activities. But I consistently declined these suggestions, explaining that the money needed to be reserved for my medical expenses and long-term care needs. "I'm scheduled for my first spinal fusion surgery next month," I told my parents during one particularly persistent conversation about family financial assistance. "The surgery and rehabilitation are going to cost over $80,000 that insurance won't fully cover. I need to keep this money available for my medical care." "Samantha, you're being selfish and short-sighted about this settlement," my mother Helen replied with frustration. "This money could help the entire family recover from the trauma of your accident, but you're hoarding it like you don't care about anyone else's needs." No. The accusation that I was being selfish for wanting to use my disability settlement for disability-related expenses was both hurtful and infuriating, but it was also a warning sign about my family's attitudes toward my medical needs and their sense of entitlement to compensation they had never earned. As I prepared for my first surgery and tried to focus on my physical therapy and recovery goals, I assumed that my family's pressure about the settlement money would fade as they came to understand the serious nature of my ongoing medical needs. I couldn't have been more wrong about their priorities or their willingness to exploit my disability for their own benefit. 6 weeks after my first spinal fusion surgery, while I was still bedridden and recovering from the procedure that was supposed to stabilize my lower spine, I received a call from my physical therapist's office that would shatter my understanding of my family's character and their respect for my medical needs. "Ms. Phillips, we need to discuss payment for your ongoing therapy sessions," the billing coordinator said, during what I thought would be a routine scheduling call. "Your insurance has reached its annual limit for physical therapy coverage and will need alternative payment arrangements to continue your treatment." The news that my insurance had reached its coverage limits much earlier than expected was concerning, but not unexpected, since spinal injury rehabilitation often requires more intensive therapy than standard insurance policies anticipate. I had always planned to use settlement funds to cover these additional medical expenses. "That's fine," I replied. "I can pay for additional sessions using funds from my disability settlement. Let me check my account balance and set up a payment plan for the remaining therapy I need." But when I accessed my settlement account online to arrange payment for continued physical therapy, I discovered something that left me staring at the screen in disbelief and growing horror. The account balance was $847,000, nearly $133,000 less than it should have been just 6 weeks after I had received the settlement. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the transaction history, which showed a series of large withdrawals totaling over $130,000 that had been made while I was in the hospital recovering from surgery and unable to monitor my accounts closely. The withdrawals were all authorized by my parents, who had been designated as temporary account managers during my immediate post-surgical recovery period. But these weren't medical expenses or disability-related purchases. The largest single withdrawal was $87,000 made to Mediterranean Cruise Lines, with a notation about Phillips Family Group booking. Additional withdrawals included payments to travel agencies, luxury hotels, and international shopping services that had nothing to do with my medical care or rehabilitation needs. The realization that my parents had used my disability settlement to fund a luxury cruise vacation while I was recovering from spinal surgery was so shocking and devastating that I couldn't initially process what I was seeing. They had stolen my medical money while I was bedridden and vulnerable, using my recovery period as cover for their theft. I immediately called my mother to demand an explanation for these unauthorized withdrawals from my disability settlement account. "Mom, I'm looking at my settlement account, and I see withdrawals for a cruise and travel expenses totaling over $130,000, I said, trying to control my voice despite my shock and anger. "What is this money being used for, and why wasn't I consulted about these expenditures?" "Oh, Samantha, I'm so glad you're feeling well enough to check your accounts," Helen replied with false cheerfulness. "We decided to book a family cruise to help everyone recover from the stress of your accident. The whole family needed this vacation to heal from the trauma we've all experienced." The casual way she was discussing stealing my medical money was almost as shocking as the theft itself. She was treating the unauthorized use of my disability settlement as a family decision, rather than recognizing it as theft from someone who was dependent on those funds for ongoing medical care. "Mom, that's my disability settlement money," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "It's specifically designated for my medical expenses and rehabilitation. You can't use it for family vacations." "Samantha, don't be so dramatic," my father Gary said when he joined the conversation. "The money was just sitting there in your account while you were recovering from surgery. We thought it made more sense to use it for something that would benefit everyone, instead of letting it earn minimal interest in the bank. Have you ever been told that stealing your medical money was actually a favor because the thieves were using it more productively than you were? That's exactly what I was hearing from my parents as they justified using my disability settlement to fund their vacation while I was recovering from spinal surgery. Besides," Helen added, "we booked accessible accommodations for you on the cruise ship. You could have joined us if you had been feeling up to international travel so soon after your surgery. The suggestion that I should be grateful for accessible cruise accommodations purchased with my own medical money, or that I should have traveled internationally just weeks after major spinal surgery, was so absurd that I couldn't formulate a coherent response. Who else is on this cruise?" I asked, dreading the answer but needing to understand the full scope of their theft from my disability settlement. "The whole extended family," Helen replied with enthusiasm. 23 relatives total, including your aunts, uncles, and cousins. Everyone needed this break after dealing with the stress of your accident, and it's been such a wonderful bonding experience for everyone. Atam, learning that my parents had used my disability settlement to fund luxury vacations for 23 extended family members, while I was rationing pain medication and unable to afford continued physical therapy, was devastating beyond anything I could have imagined. They had literally chosen to prioritize everyone else's pleasure over my medical needs. "We got premium suites and upgraded dining packages for everyone," Gary added proudly. "The cruise line gave us a group discount, but even with the savings, we're talking about $150,000 total for the entire family vacation. It's been the trip of a lifetime for everyone." The detailed accounting of how much of my medical money they had spent on luxury cruise amenities while I was eating ramen noodles and skipping physical therapy appointments I couldn't afford was both infuriating and heartbreaking. But what made the betrayal even more devastating was discovering that my family was actively posting thousands of photos and social media updates from their luxury cruise vacation, funded by my disability settlement, seemingly oblivious to the cruelty of flaunting their stolen luxury while I struggled with basic medical expenses. My Aunt Sharon's Facebook page was filled with photos of expensive specialty dining experiences, with captions like, "Amazing $500 per person dinner at the chef's table. This Mediterranean cruise is the best family vacation ever." Meanwhile, I was eating instant noodles because I had to choose between food and physical therapy appointments. My cousin Jennifer posted daily updates from the ship's spa, including photos of massage treatments and luxury wellness packages that cost more per day than I spent on food in a month. Getting pampered on the Phillips family cruise. "We all needed this relaxation after such a stressful year." She captioned a photo of herself receiving a $300 facial treatment. Have you ever watched your family members post photos of luxuries purchased with your medical money while you couldn't afford basic necessities? That's exactly what I was experiencing as I scrolled through social media posts, documenting how my disability settlement was being used to fund other people's vacations, while I struggled to pay for continued medical care. The most painful posts came from my Uncle Robert, who shared detailed photos and descriptions of shore excursions and cultural activities that were costing hundreds of dollars per person per day. "Private tour of ancient Greek ruins today. This educational experience is priceless for the whole family," he posted alongside photos of guided tours that were being funded by money I needed for spinal fusion surgery. As I watched my family document their luxury vacation using my medical money, I was forced to cancel physical therapy appointments, postpone follow-up medical imaging, and ration my pain medication to stretch it between doctor visits I could barely afford. The contrast between their indulgent spending and my medical deprivation was stark and devastating. But the cruelest aspect of their social media documentation was how they consistently framed their luxury cruise as a necessary healing experience for the family trauma caused by my accident, rather than acknowledging that they were spending money designated for my ongoing medical needs. This cruise is exactly what our family needed to recover from the emotional stress of Samantha's accident. My mother Helen posted alongside photos of champagne dinners and luxury entertainment. Sometimes families need to come together and heal through shared experiences. The narrative that they were using my disability settlement for their own emotional healing while I struggled with the actual medical consequences of my injuries was both psychologically cruel and legally problematic, since it demonstrated their understanding that the money was specifically related to my accident while simultaneously justifying their theft. By the time their cruise ended and they returned home, I had been forced to delay my second spinal surgery, discontinue physical therapy, and rely on over-the-counter pain medication because I couldn't afford the prescription medications my doctor had recommended. My recovery had been significantly set back by their theft of my medical funds. But what happened when they returned from their luxury vacation would prove to be even more devastating than their original theft, as they organized a celebration to share their vacation experiences while completely ignoring the medical crisis their actions had created for me. The welcome home celebration that my family organized after returning from their Mediterranean cruise was held at my parents' house 3 days after their luxury vacation ended, and it was designed to allow all 23 cruise participants to share their experiences and show off the expensive souvenirs they had purchased with my disability settlement money. I was invited to attend, as if I should be excited to hear about the vacation I had inadvertently funded, while being unable to afford my own medical care. "Samantha, you have to come to the celebration tonight," my mother Helen called that morning. "Everyone wants to share their cruise experiences with you, and we have so many beautiful photos and stories to tell. It's going to be such a wonderful family gathering." The expectation that I should attend a celebration of the vacation funded by my medical money was both insulting and surreal, but I was curious to see how my family would justify their theft while surrounded by evidence of their luxury spending. I arrived at my parents' house in my wheelchair, still dealing with significant pain from my delayed medical treatment, to find the living room decorated with Mediterranean cruise memorabilia and expensive souvenirs that represented thousands of dollars in purchases made with my disability settlement funds. "Samantha, we missed you so much on the cruise," my Aunt Patricia exclaimed, as she showed me a collection of expensive jewelry and artwork she had purchased during shore excursions. "We kept talking about how much you would have loved the accessible tours and the beautiful scenery." The suggestion that I would have enjoyed watching my family spend my medical money on luxury tours while I needed spinal surgery was particularly cruel, especially since my ongoing mobility limitations and pain levels would have made international travel impossible even if I could have afforded it. But the centerpiece of the celebration was a comprehensive slideshow presentation that Helen had organized, featuring hundreds of photos from their luxury cruise experience, along with detailed commentary about each expensive activity and amenity they had enjoyed using my disability settlement money. "This presentation captures the amazing family bonding experience we had on the Mediterranean cruise," Helen announced as she dimmed the lights and started the slideshow. "Everyone needs to see these incredible memories we created together." The slideshow was torture to watch, featuring photo after photo of my family enjoying luxury accommodations, gourmet dining, professional entertainment, and expensive shore excursions while I sat in my wheelchair knowing that each image represented medical care I couldn't access because they had stolen my settlement funds. "Here's the champagne reception in our premium suite," Helen narrated over photos of my relatives toasting their vacation with expensive drinks. The cruise line provided complimentary upgrades for our group booking, and everyone had such luxurious accommodations. The detailed descriptions of luxury amenities purchased with my medical money while I was rationing pain medication and eating instant noodles was psychologically devastating, but what made it even worse was the enthusiastic participation of family members who seemed genuinely excited to share their experiences. "The chef's table dining was incredible," my cousin Michael added during his portion of the presentation. We had 7-course meals with wine pairings that cost $800 per person, but it was worth every penny for such a special family experience. Have you ever been forced to listen to detailed descriptions of luxury experiences purchased with your own money while you couldn't afford basic necessities? That's exactly what I was experiencing as my family members took turns describing their expensive cruise activities funded by my disability settlement. The shore excursion descriptions were particularly painful because they represented thousands of dollars in daily spending, while I was postponing medical treatments I desperately needed. We took private helicopters to explore the Greek islands, my Uncle Robert explained with obvious pride. The aerial photography opportunities were incredible, and the personalized tour guides made the experience educational and memorable. Each expensive activity they described represented medical care I had been forced to postpone or cancel entirely. The private helicopter tours cost more than my monthly physical therapy treatments. The luxury spa packages were more expensive than my prescription medications. The premium dining experiences exceeded the cost of my follow-up medical appointments. But what made the celebration even more surreal and cruel was how my family members consistently framed their luxury spending as necessary healing from the trauma of my accident, rather than acknowledging that they had stolen money specifically designated for my medical recovery. This cruise was exactly what we all needed to process the emotional impact of Samantha's accident, my Aunt Sharon explained during her section of the presentation. Being together as a family in such a beautiful setting allowed us to heal and move forward from such a traumatic experience. The narrative that they needed luxury vacations to recover from my medical trauma while I was actually living with the ongoing consequences of my injuries was both psychologically manipulative and legally significant, since it demonstrated their awareness that the money was connected to my accident, while justifying their misappropriation of my medical funds. As the slideshow continued for over 2 hours, with detailed descriptions of every expensive meal, entertainment option, and luxury amenity they had enjoyed, I was calculating the medical treatments I had been forced to postpone and the equipment I couldn't purchase because of their spending. The $500 per person specialty dining experiences alone had cost more than my monthly pain medication budget. The premium suite accommodations exceeded the cost of the adaptive equipment I needed for my home. The shore excursions and entertainment packages were more expensive than the second spinal surgery I had been forced to delay. "We bought you some souvenirs to help you feel included in our Mediterranean adventure," Helen announced, as family members presented me with expensive gifts they had purchased with my own disability settlement money. "These beautiful items will help you remember this amazing family experience." The presentation of expensive souvenirs purchased with my medical money as gifts to make me feel included in the vacation I had inadvertently funded was so absurd and cruel that I couldn't formulate an appropriate response. They were giving me back tiny portions of my own money while celebrating their theft of my medical funds. But the celebration wasn't just about sharing vacation memories. It was also about planning their next group vacation using my remaining disability settlement money, since they apparently viewed my medical funds as an ongoing source of family entertainment funding. As the evening concluded with my family members excitedly discussing potential destinations for their next luxury vacation, funded by my disability settlement, I realized that their theft wasn't a one-time mistake, but rather an ongoing plan to use my medical money for their recreational activities while expecting me to be grateful for their inclusion in spending my own funds. The woman who had entered that celebration still hoping for family understanding and support was about to become someone who would use every legal tool available to ensure that their exploitation of my disability would result in consequences they never could have anticipated. The weeks following the Welcome Home celebration were marked by increasingly hostile family interactions, as I repeatedly asked for the return of my stolen settlement money and was consistently told that I was being unreasonable, selfish, and ungrateful for the family bonding experience they had created using my disability funds. "Samantha, you need to stop being so dramatic about this money situation," my mother Helen said during one particularly frustrating phone conversation. "The cruise was a wonderful experience that benefited everyone, including you, because family unity is important for your emotional recovery. The suggestion that I should be grateful for their theft, because family unity was somehow beneficial for my medical recovery, was both psychologically manipulative and medically absurd, since my actual recovery had been significantly delayed by their misappropriation of funds I needed for surgery and rehabilitation." "Mom, I need that money for my second spinal fusion surgery," I replied, trying to focus the conversation on my legitimate medical needs rather than their justifications for theft. "I've already had to postpone the procedure twice because I can't afford the portions that insurance won't cover." Samantha, you can always get additional insurance coverage or apply for medical financing, my father Gary interjected dismissively. But we can't get back the family bonding time we would have lost if we hadn't taken this cruise when we had the opportunity. The casual dismissal of my medical needs while prioritizing their vacation experiences was both heartless and revealing about their true attitudes toward my disability and their responsibilities as family members. They viewed my ongoing medical crisis as less important than their temporary recreational pleasure. But what made their victim blaming even more devastating was their decision to begin planning their next luxury vacation using my remaining disability settlement money, apparently viewing my medical funds as an unlimited source of family entertainment funding. We've been researching African safari tours for next year, my Uncle Robert announced, during a family dinner I foolishly attended, hoping to discuss the return of my stolen funds. The group rates are excellent if we book early, and it would be another incredible family bonding experience. The casual discussion of planning their next luxury vacation using my medical money while I was sitting in my wheelchair, clearly struggling with ongoing pain and mobility limitations, was so cruel and disconnected from reality that I could barely respond. "Robert, that's my disability settlement money you're talking about spending," I said, trying to maintain some composure despite my shock at their continued theft planning. "I need those funds for ongoing medical treatment, not for family vacations. Samantha, families should share good fortune instead of hoarding money selfishly," my cousin Jennifer replied with obvious frustration at my resistance to their spending plans. "You got lucky with that big settlement, and it's only fair that the family should benefit from your good fortune. The characterization of my disability settlement as good fortune that I should share with family members, rather than recognizing it as compensation for life-changing injuries that required ongoing medical care, was both legally ignorant and morally bankrupt. Have you ever been told that your disability compensation was good fortune, that you should share, rather than understanding that it represented a lifetime of medical expenses and lost earning capacity? That's exactly what I was hearing from family members who viewed my settlement as a windfall, rather than recognizing it as medical necessity funding. Besides, my Aunt Patricia added, you can always get more insurance coverage or find other ways to pay for your medical treatments. But opportunities for family experiences like this don't come along very often. The suggestion that I could easily find alternative funding for my medical needs while family vacation opportunities were rare and precious was both practically unrealistic and emotionally cruel, demonstrating their complete lack of understanding about disability-related financial challenges. As these conversations continued over several weeks, with my family consistently dismissing my medical needs while enthusiastically planning additional luxury vacations using my settlement money, I realized that they viewed me not as a person with legitimate medical expenses, but as a source of funding for their recreational activities. We've calculated that your remaining settlement balance could fund at least 2 more major family trips, my mother Helen informed me during another conversation about their vacation planning. An African safari next year, and maybe a European river cruise the year after that. It's going to be such an amazing few years for family bonding. The systematic planning to spend my entire disability settlement on luxury vacations, while I struggled with basic medical expenses, was both shocking in its scope and devastating in its implications for my long-term health and financial security. But while my family was making these elaborate plans for spending my medical money on their recreational activities, I was quietly working with disability rights attorneys and federal investigators who were appalled by what they described as one of the most egregious cases of medical fund theft they had ever encountered. Ms. Phillips, what your family has done represents serious federal crimes related to disability fund misappropriation and elder abuse, Attorney Rebecca Martinez explained during our initial consultation. The fact that they're planning additional thefts while you're struggling with medical expenses makes this case particularly compelling for prosecution. The legal framework for addressing their crimes was more comprehensive than I had initially realized, with federal statutes specifically designed to protect disabled individuals from financial exploitation by family members and care providers. We can pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery, including damages for the medical care you've been forced to postpone because of their theft, Rebecca continued. We can also seek injunctive relief to prevent them from accessing your remaining settlement funds. But what proved to be even more valuable was my decision to begin secretly recording family conversations where they discussed their theft, justified their actions, and planned additional spending of my medical money on luxury vacations. The settlement money was just sitting there earning minimal interest, my father Gary said during one recorded conversation. We made a smart financial decision by using it for experiences that will create lasting family memories instead of letting it waste away in low-yield investment accounts. The recorded justification for their theft provided perfect evidence of their attitudes and intentions, but more importantly, it documented their ongoing planning to continue stealing my medical funds for recreational purposes. Samantha is being completely unreasonable about sharing this money, my mother Helen said during another recorded discussion. She acts like she's the only one who deserves to benefit from this settlement, but we've all been affected by her accident and we all deserve some compensation. Have you ever recorded family members admitting that they viewed your disability settlement as compensation they deserved for being inconvenienced by your medical crisis? That's exactly what I was documenting as my family revealed their true attitudes about my medical needs versus their recreational desires. 6 months after their Mediterranean cruise, while my family was finalizing plans for their African safari, using my remaining settlement money, I was ready to execute a comprehensive legal strategy that would expose their crimes, recover my stolen funds, and ensure they faced serious consequences for exploiting my disability. The timing was perfect. They had organized another family gathering to celebrate their upcoming safari plans and to distribute expensive travel gear they had purchased with my medical money, providing the ideal setting for serving federal papers and beginning their education about the serious legal consequences of disability fund theft. The second family reunion that would bring my relatives' criminal enterprise to its dramatic conclusion was held at a rented community center, where they had planned to celebrate their upcoming African safari and distribute expensive travel equipment they had purchased with my remaining disability settlement funds. The event was designed to build excitement for their next luxury vacation, while finalizing group bookings that would consume another $200,000 of my medical money. I arrived at the gathering in my wheelchair, still experiencing significant pain from the surgeries I had been forced to postpone because of their theft, knowing that this would be the most satisfying day of my life as I watched federal investigators dismantle their criminal operation. "Samantha, we're so excited you decided to join us for safari planning," my Uncle Robert said enthusiastically as he showed me expensive camping gear and photography equipment he had purchased with my settlement funds. "Even though you can't physically participate in the safari activities, you can still be part of the planning and preparation process." The suggestion that I should be excited about planning a vacation I couldn't attend, funded by medical money I desperately needed, while being excluded from activities because of disabilities caused by the accident that generated the settlement, was so absurdly cruel that it perfectly captured my family's complete disconnection from reality. The community center was decorated with African-themed materials and expensive safari equipment that represented thousands of dollars in purchases made with my disability settlement money. Tables were covered with high-end cameras, camping gear, and luxury travel accessories that family members were excitedly examining and claiming for their upcoming adventure. "We've booked luxury safari lodges with private guides for the entire 2-week experience," my mother Helen announced to the assembled relatives. "The total cost for all 23 family members will be $280,000, but it includes everything from transportation to meals to professional photography services." The detailed accounting of how much of my medical money they planned to spend on their African vacation while I couldn't afford basic medical necessities was both infuriating and legally perfect, since it demonstrated the scope of their ongoing theft and their complete lack of understanding about the legitimate purpose of my disability settlement. We even arranged for specialized medical evacuation insurance in case anyone gets sick during the safari, my cousin Michael added proudly. "Safety is our top priority for this once-in-a-lifetime family adventure." The irony of them purchasing medical insurance for their luxury vacation while stealing money I needed for actual medical treatment was so stark that several family members seemed to recognize the contradiction, though none of them addressed it directly. Have you ever watched people plan luxury vacations with medical evacuation insurance using money stolen from someone who couldn't afford basic medical care? That's exactly what I was witnessing as my family prioritized protecting their vacation health while destroying my access to necessary medical treatment. At exactly 3 p.m., when the reunion was at its peak and all the family members were present to witness the occasion, FBI Special Agent Sarah Rodriguez and her team arrived with federal marshals and a comprehensive package of legal documents that would completely destroy my family's afternoon and their assumptions about facing consequences for their crimes. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are federal agents executing search and seizure warrants related to disability fund theft and medical financial exploitation," Agent Rodriguez announced, as agents began photographing and documenting the expensive safari equipment purchased with my settlement money. Everyone present needs to remain seated while we serve legal papers and secure evidence." The silence that followed was absolute and profound, as 23 family members realized that their safari planning party was about to become a federal crime scene, and that their vacation dreams were about to turn into criminal nightmares. Helen Phillips, Gary Phillips, and 21 additional family members, you are being served with federal warrants charging you with disability fund theft, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation, and misappropriation of medical settlement funds. Agent Rodriguez continued, as deputies began serving papers on each individual involved in the conspiracy. The systematic serving of federal papers to every family member who had participated in the cruise and safari planning was both efficient and devastating, but what made it even more impactful was that it was happening in front of the expensive evidence of their crimes. This safari equipment and travel gear purchased with stolen disability settlement funds is being seized as evidence of ongoing criminal financial exploitation, one of the federal agents announced, as they began cataloging and removing the expensive items my family had been excited about claiming. The visual impact of watching federal agents seize their safari equipment while explaining that it had been purchased with stolen medical money was both satisfying and educational, providing clear demonstration of how their recreational spending had constituted federal crimes. "This is impossible," my mother Helen protested as she read through her federal charges. "That settlement money wasn't being used for anything important. Samantha was just letting it sit in the bank, while we put it to good use for family bonding experiences." Mrs. Phillips, disability settlement funds are legally designated for the medical care and rehabilitation needs of the injured party, Agent Rodriguez replied, while showing her copies of the settlement agreement and federal statutes governing disability fund protection. Using those funds for recreational activities constitutes serious federal crimes, regardless of your justifications. The legal education was happening in real time, as my family members learned about concepts like fiduciary responsibility, disability fund protection, and criminal liability for medical financial exploitation, while watching their vacation dreams disappear into federal evidence bags. "But we're family," my father Gary said desperately as he processed the federal charges against him. "Families share resources and support each other. Samantha should want to help her family members have these experiences." Mr. Phillips, family relationships do not provide exemption from federal laws protecting disabled individuals from financial exploitation, Agent Rodriguez replied, while documenting his statements for additional evidence. "Your family connection to Ms. Phillips actually makes your crimes more serious under federal elder abuse and disability protection statutes. But the most satisfying moment came when I finally spoke, addressing the same audience that had dismissed my medical needs while celebrating their theft of my disability settlement funds. 6 months ago, you stole $150,000 of my disability settlement to take a Mediterranean cruise while I was recovering from spinal surgery and couldn't afford physical therapy," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned gathering. "Today, you're learning what happens when people exploit someone's disability for their own recreational pleasure. The parallel between their celebration of theft and their facing of consequences was intentional and precise, creating the same kind of public exposure and accountability they had forced me to witness while they spent my medical money on luxuries. While you were posting photos of $500 dinners and spa treatments, I was eating ramen noodles and rationing pain medication because you had stolen the money I needed for medical care," I continued, finally able to express the devastation their actions had caused. "While you planned African safaris with my settlement funds, I postponed surgeries and canceled therapy appointments because I couldn't afford basic medical treatment." The detailed accounting of how their theft had affected my medical care and recovery was both personally cathartic and legally significant, providing clear documentation of the harm their crimes had caused to someone who depended on settlement funds for basic health maintenance. As federal agents continued processing evidence and serving papers, while my family members sat in shocked silence, I realized that this moment represented not just justice for their crimes, but also the beginning of my own recovery from both my physical injuries and their emotional manipulation. The comprehensive legal and financial resolution that followed my family's dramatic federal bust moved through the justice system with remarkable efficiency, driven by overwhelming evidence of their crimes, clear documentation of my medical needs they had ignored, and federal prosecutors who were determined to send a strong message about the consequences of exploiting disabled individuals for personal gain. Helen and Gary Phillips were ultimately sentenced to 4 years in federal prison each, while the 21 extended family members who had participated in the cruise and safari planning received sentences ranging from 18 months to 3 years, depending on their level of involvement and the amounts they had personally benefited from the stolen funds. The defendant systematically exploited a disabled family member's medical settlement funds to fund luxury vacations while their victim struggled to access basic medical care, Federal Judge Patricia Chen said during the sentencing hearing. This represents one of the most callous and comprehensive cases of disability financial exploitation this court has encountered. The judicial condemnation was both personally validating and legally significant, establishing important precedent for protecting disabled individuals from financial exploitation by trusted family members who abuse their relationships to facilitate theft. But perhaps more importantly, the asset forfeiture and restitution process resulted in my complete recovery of stolen funds, plus additional damages totaling over $2 million, providing resources not just to address my delayed medical care, but also to access cutting-edge treatments that significantly improved my long-term prognosis and quality of life. Ms. Phillips, the Comprehensive Restitution Award recognizes both your direct financial losses and the medical harm caused by delayed treatment, my attorney Rebecca Martinez explained as we finalized the recovery process. This settlement provides resources for the most advanced spinal rehabilitation treatments available anywhere in the world. The financial recovery allowed me to access experimental treatments, specialized equipment, and intensive rehabilitation programs that had been completely beyond reach when my family was stealing my settlement funds for cruise vacations. The medical improvements I achieved were dramatic and life-changing. Using the advanced treatments funded by my recovered settlement money, I regained significant mobility and independence that my doctors had initially thought might not be possible. While I still used mobility assistance for longer distances and complex activities, I was able to return to modified physical therapy practice and begin advocacy work that would help other disabled individuals avoid similar exploitation. Whitney's case demonstrates the devastating impact that financial exploitation can have on disabled individuals' medical outcomes and quality of life, I testified before a congressional subcommittee examining disability rights protections. When family members steal settlement funds designated for medical care, they're not just committing financial crimes, they're actively harming their loved one's health and recovery. The legislative testimony was part of comprehensive advocacy work I began to help strengthen legal protections for disabled individuals and educate medical professionals about recognizing signs of financial exploitation by family members and caregivers. Have you ever transformed your own victimization into advocacy that helped protect thousands of other people from similar harm? That's exactly what I experienced as my story became part of broader efforts to strengthen disability rights and financial protection laws. The most meaningful development was the establishment of the Disability Settlement Protection Foundation, which provides emergency medical funding for disabled individuals whose settlement money has been stolen by family members, while also offering legal assistance to recover stolen funds and pursue criminal charges against the perpetrators. Samantha Phillips's courage in prosecuting her own family members for settlement theft has inspired dozens of other disabled individuals to come forward about similar exploitation, Foundation Director Dr. Michael Chen said during our annual conference. Her case showed that even the most trusted family members can be held accountable for financial crimes against disabled individuals. The foundation had provided emergency medical funding for over 200 disabled individuals whose families had stolen their settlement money, while also helping secure criminal convictions against more than 50 family members and caregivers who had exploited disabled relatives for personal financial gain. But perhaps the most personally meaningful aspect of my recovery was reconnecting with legitimate family relationships based on respect and support, rather than exploitation and manipulation. Several distant relatives who had been horrified by my parents' and extended family's behavior reached out to provide genuine emotional support and practical assistance during my recovery. Samantha, we want you to know that what Helen and Gary did was completely unacceptable and doesn't represent the values that most of our family believes in, my great-aunt Martha said during one of many supportive conversations. We're proud of how you fought for justice and turned your experience into advocacy that helps other people. The validation and support from family members who understood the difference between legitimate family assistance and criminal exploitation was healing and encouraging, showing me that not all family relationships had to be based on manipulation and theft. 5 years after my workplace accident, and 3 years after my family's federal convictions for disability fund theft, I was invited to deliver the keynote address at the National Conference on Disability Rights, speaking to an audience of advocates, attorneys, and disabled individuals about the importance of financial protection and the possibility of recovery, even after the most devastating betrayals. My family stole my medical settlement money to fund luxury cruises while I ate ramen noodles and postponed surgeries, I told the audience of disability rights professionals. But their crimes ultimately led to stronger legal protections, better medical outcomes, and advocacy work that has helped hundreds of other disabled individuals recover from similar exploitation. The transformation from victim to advocate had been both personally healing and professionally fulfilling, allowing me to use my experience with financial exploitation to create systemic changes that would protect vulnerable individuals from trusted family members who might try to exploit their disabilities. As I concluded my presentation with a comprehensive tribute to the disability rights attorneys and federal investigators who had made my recovery possible, I realized that my family's theft had ultimately led to outcomes that were more meaningful and impactful than simply having access to my original settlement funds. The medical money that was supposed to provide personal rehabilitation had instead become the foundation for protecting thousands of other disabled individuals, while creating legal precedents and advocacy resources that would benefit the disability rights community for generations. If you're reading this and you're dealing with family members who view your disability settlement or benefits as resources they're entitled to share, please know that you have legal rights and advocacy resources available to protect your medical funds from exploitation. Sometimes the people who claim to care about your recovery are actually the ones most willing to sabotage it for their own benefit. Financial exploitation of disabled individuals is a serious federal crime, and families who commit these crimes deserve the harshest consequences the justice system can provide. If this story resonated with your own experiences, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had family members try to exploit your disability or medical needs for their own benefit? How did you handle situations where people treated your medical funds as family resources? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar exploitation. Thank you for joining me on this journey from disability and exploitation to recovery and advocacy. Remember that your medical needs and financial security are worth fighting for, even when the people trying to exploit you are members of your own family. See you in our next story here at Her Sweet Revenge.